So there's our riff, and the next step should really be to put that down on a looper and learn how to solo over it. So let's have a crack at that. With that and the sixth both added to the minor pentatonic, now we have, instead of a 5-note scale, a 7-note scale, and it's the Dorian scale, funnily enough. Now for our final example, I'm just going to chuck everything in a blender and I'm going to unlock the rest of the fretboard. Let me introduce you guys to Rosie, little Havanese puppy that we got back in March. Look at the camera. Good girl, good girl. Hey guys, hope you're doing well. So today's lesson is just kind of a short and sweet one. I wanted to get into a little bit of a Magic Sam minor blues groove kind of thing with you all. This is a really fun thing to be able to lay down on a looper and jam over as well, which we'll look at in a little bit. Okay, now let's say we're in the key of B minor. Let's visualize this B minor chord here at the 7th fret. Also visualize how your minor pentatonic sits around that chord shape. Be able to add the flat 5, you know, the blue note. And be able to see all of that nice and clearly. Now for the first part of the riff, we're simply sliding into the 9th fret of the A string on the 3rd finger, and then walking up the minor pentatonic scale, so the flat 7 and the root, and then use those same 2 notes again, and do one of these kind of Hendrixy trills, where you're doing a pick here on the 7th fret, and then hammering onto the 9th fret, pulling back off, hammering back on, pulling back off, repeatedly, very quickly. And then hook your thumb over to grab the root. That's kind of optional. You know, if you're playing with a bassist or another guitar player, you probably don't need to fill in that bass note, but I like to do it to flesh things out when I'm playing on my own. And then we grab this on the top 3 strings, barring the 9th fret with the 3rd finger, and then 2 frets down on the 1st finger, and that's the whole thing. Such a killer riff over a minor chord. This whole thing here, you can slide in if you like. You can also try and do what Magic Sam does, where he kind of accents the first chord, and then the second one he plays fairly quietly. That kind of thing. So the Magic Sam tune that I'm using as a reference for this riff is All of Your Love, where the 4 chord is a E dominant 9 and the 5 chord is an F9. which is kind of unique. You know, usually if you're in a minor key for a blues, your 1 would be minor, your 4 would be minor, and the 5 would be either minor or dominant, often with an alteration like a sharpened 9. Here he's kind of mixing major and minor blues. He's doing minor for the 1, but then more of a major blues thing on the 4 and the 5. We're not going to get into the 4 and 5 here because we're not learning that song, we're just learning the riff, essentially. But in the context of a normal minor blues, you'll want to be able to move this riff to the 4 chord. So let's have a look at how we can do that. We could simply drag everything up here, of course. Thinking of the 12th fret position for your E minor. But what's neater is if you can drop down through the string sets. So let's move that phrase a 4th up. The same kind of stuff, right? Just 1 string set thinner. And then you could grab the root here, and then you can grab this little shape here that looks kind of like an open D chord, and just slide it up and back. So that's exactly the same kind of thing we had on the B minor. And then back to B minor. And then you might go where I'm going to that 5 dominant with a sharp 9, back to the E minor, and then back home. A lot of really cool things you can play around with there. If you want to know a little more about how the minor blues typically works, check out my B.B. King Thrill Is Gone lead study. Same key, coincidentally. That kind of riff is the kind of thing you hear in a lot of songs. You know, take for example, I Want You, She's So Heavy by the Beatles in the verses. Just one of many examples. So there's our riff, and the next step should really be to put that down on a looper and learn how to solo over it. So let's have a crack at that. Now when you're putting a loop down, make sure you're always starting and stopping the recording of the loop exactly on beat 1 of the bar. So this phrase goes 1, 2, 3, 4 and a 1. So you won't press the start record button for your looper until you play this note, because that's on beat 1. So you'll be chopping off this. But if you think about how this works in a cyclical way, you'll also capture this at the end of one of your other bars, so when you cycle it round, it should be seamless. Let me show you what I mean. 1, 2, 3, 4 and a... So you can hear there's no real... You can't tell where the loop starts and stops. So just so you can see what I was doing, I was clicking record, and then 3, 4, stop. And then what you're doing is perfectly capturing, 2 bars in this case. Now just to fill things out a little more, I'm going to go ahead and add a drum track in Logic Pro, but you don't have to do that. Now with that down on the looper, your first step for improvisation should be the B minor pentatonic. Shape 1, shape 2, and shape 5, let's say. Just to keep ourselves nice and tidy. We'll maybe explore the other shapes in a moment. Rosie! Hello? Hello, Rosie. Good girl. Good girlie. How you doing, my girl? How you doing? It's warm, isn't it? It's warm. Good girl, Rosie. Let me introduce you guys to Rosie, little Havanese puppy that we got back in March. She's a beautiful little girl. Really made this house a home again. Good girl. She loves good music. Say hi. Rosie, look at the camera. Good girl. Good girl. Good girl.
Oh, sorry, she spoke up.
It's all right.
Okay.
Okay, so that was all B minor blues scale. Some of the things I was really aiming at there were double stops. Notice how I was getting a lot of use out of combining notes rather than just playing single notes. So for example, if we work from kind of the top down, things like this. You know, they add a lot of vibe to what you play. And it's very simple. Barring the 10th fret on the top two strings with the first finger, hitting them both and hammering onto the 12th fret of the B string. Now, that's all in your B minor pentatonic, isn't it? And using kind of reverse rakes, you can find these pairs of notes on the next strings as well. You know, frets 9 and 10 on strings G and B. Hammer onto the 11th fret of the G string, and then you've got your harmonica lick. You've obviously got double stops like this, double 7, double 9 with a bend. That's always nice and dirty, old school bluesy, not too polite. All of that kind of stuff, it just has so much vibe to it. Now, another thing that I did was one of my favourite licks, which you'll have seen me use 1,000 times. That kind of stuff, which works really well with hybrid picking. So that's barring the top 3 strings on the 7th fret. There's your B minor triad. Add the flat 5, you know, the blue note, and slide up from it to the 5th. Go back to the flat 5, slide down to the 4th, and have a bit of a play around. And more of these trill things. The phrasing has to be quite conversational as well. Don't try and make it sit too tidily in the pocket. You know, remember, we're going for that juke-joint, dirty, swampy blues vibe here. So the less tidy, the better in some ways. So feel free to play things that are quite chaotic. Now, another really good thing to work on with this is to use your 6ths. Maybe just that portion of your B minor scale in 6ths. Frets 11 and 10 on strings G and E, then the 9th fret on both, 7th fret on both, onto the next 2 strings, so D and B strings, at 9 and 7. To me, that's very kind of Dave Gilmour, Shine On You Crazy Diamond, if you think about that, in G minor. He's using those little fills. But of course, here we're in B minor. So now I'm just going to try and utilize those 6ths as often as I can over that same backing track. Check it out. Now what else can we add? Let's try adding the 6th interval. That can sound really interesting over a minor blues. So in the case of this key of B minor, the 6th is here. your A flat, and here at the 9th fret. So you've got it in 2 octaves, spanning shape 1, if you want to think of it that way. So phrases like this. Can sound really interesting, really leaning into that 6th. Okay, now back to the backing track with everything we've collected so far. Okay, now next, I hinted at it there with one of those phrases. Let's add the 9. C sharp in this case, or D flat. Now with that and the 6th both added to the minor pentatonic, now we have, instead of a 5-note scale, a 7-note scale, and it's the Dorian scale, funnily enough. The only difference here is that we're also leaning into that flat 5. So we're using the blues scale plus the 6 and the 9. Let's see how that sounds. Now for our final example, I'm just going to chuck everything in a blender and I'm going to unlock the rest of the fretboard using all the same kind of things. I might lean in a little more to triads because we've not really discussed that so far. So okay, here we go. So as you can see by that point, we've added a ton of stuff and maybe some of it's overkill, but hey, that's a good way to practice, right? Just throw everything you know at it, including the kitchen sink, and see what sticks. And obviously when it comes to actually making music out of this stuff, you want to be more tasteful and more restrained. But it's important to have options and build a lot of vocabulary for these things, no matter how simple. Okay, so a bit of tone talk just to finish things off here. So in the spirit of the old kind of dirty juke joint blues, I'm using an old junk guitar essentially, a 1958 Harmony Stratotone H47. Fantastic guitar actually for the money. Didn't cost me a lot, it was a bit of a bargain. The pickup itself is probably worth the entry fee. These things sound really nice. This switch doesn't work, in fact it comes off, so I need to get that sorted. I had a good setup done on it. Still not the most comfy guitar to play. The frets are extremely low. They're the original frets still, and I think they're as low as they can go. Makes life a little difficult up on the top strings. But it definitely has a bit of a vibe about it. It's quite lively acoustically. It's totally hollow, of course, so that helps. The neck is quite nice as well. It's quite chunky. Ideally, I want one of those H44s, I think it is, the same one that Tom Waits and Mark Ribot and Junior Watson use, the little kind of gold Les Paul shaped ones. But they're extremely expensive nowadays, so if you know of one that's going cheap, do let me know. And this is going into my 1969 Deluxe reverb on the first input of the vibrato channel with the volume at 4, just to get a bit of breakup when you dig in. Yeah, it sounds quite dirty. It's pretty cool. I'm using a H3 Dunlop pick, and as for strings, I'm not sure what they are. They're the ones that were on it when I bought it. They feel like 10s to me. Okay, and I guess we'll call it there. So do check out some Magic Sam and some of this old school 50s blues stuff like Otis Rush and R.L. Burnside as well. There's a real vibe to it, and it's not all about being fancy, it's about playing with a bit of feel. Okay guys, so do let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this lesson. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all again next time. Alright, take care.